Welcome to another of our conversations on cybersecurity intelligence. We're talking to experts in the field to help figure out what is going on with respect to careers and jobs in the cybersecurity market. And today, I'm very happy to welcome Christopher Henderson from Datto Corporation. So welcome, Chris.
Thank you very much.
And so we're going to be talking about Chris's background in cybersecurity and what his perspectives are on the sort of career and job market, not just in the pandemic, but just in general. So first of all, Chris, can you talk a little bit about Datto? I think in the Connecticut area, Datto is a pretty well-known company. What do you guys do, and what is your product and service that you have?
Yeah, so Datto started primarily as a backup and disaster recovery solution. We offered an appliance that would do full disk backups, and then in the event that you had a disaster, our appliance could turn into your machine within seconds and virtualize it that way. In more recent years, we've really spanned out. We really aim to be the market or the vendor of choice for managed service providers and selling them the technologies that they need, both to run their businesses internally as well as service their clients. And so now we have an array of networking equipment that we sell. We sell a remote management and monitoring platform. We sell a PSA used to run their business internally. We still bread and buttered backup disaster recovery, but we've now also branched out into doing backup and disaster recovery for SaaS platforms as well as on-premise solutions.
Very cool. So you started out as a startup, obviously, and you've continued to add in new services. So in some ways, you're, I guess, kind of a startup, or you're growing your business in a lot of different directions. So you're a director of cybersecurity or information security there. Could you talk a little bit about, give listeners a little bit of perspective on what you do, and how do you operate in a rapidly changing environment like that? What has that been like for you?
Yeah, so my team is responsible for governance, risk, compliance, and audit at Datto. So we are responsible for the enforcement of our internal policies as well as modification of those. Primarily our responsibility, though, is compliance with the compliance frameworks that we adhere to. So right now, Datto is SOC 2 compliant, and so every year there's about 700 controls that my team regularly audits throughout the organization to ensure that we're meeting those controls that we've self-elected to adhere to. It's an interesting role because the SOC 2 reports are customer facing, and so it's one of the roles within cybersecurity where both you're increasing the overall security posture of the organization, but you're also working in tandem with our sales engineers and sales teams and helping provide that collateral in order to decrease the overall sales pipeline and lead to larger revenue for the company.
So are you saying that new customers would want, or prospective customers would want to look at the SOC 2 report, or do they even get access to it, or do they get access to you to answer questions about it, or all of those things? How does that work?
Yeah, a little bit of all of it. So prospective customers as well as existing customers want to ensure that they're doing business with a vendor that is secure. And so every year we have an external firm come in and audit our security posture, and my team helps walk those auditors through that. My team will regularly get on the phone with prospective customers, current customers that have questions about our security posture or how to better deploy our technology in secure manners. And so we help them with those decision processes as well.
I see. So it sounds like there's a lot of communications, human communications are a significant part of your job. Would you agree with that? And are your communications efforts sort of outward facing or inward facing, or how do you interact with the rest of the organization as well as customers?
Absolutely. Communication is a key component of what my group is responsible for. So when you think about internal audit, you have 700 controls that span your organization. It's not enough to just audit those when the external auditors come in, because you wouldn't know any gaps that you've had to remediate over the year, and you wouldn't know the overall posture. And so my team does internal audits twice annually in preparation for the external one. And so imagine you are going out to business leaders, asking them to pause their day in order to respond to this mock audit that they understand has no customer-facing value potentially. And so there's a lot of challenges that come into play of getting participation in these events throughout the organization. My team also delivers the internal security awareness training, and we fish all of our employees regularly in order to assess sort of where our highest pods of risk are when it comes to phishing and malware and things of that nature. And so being able to, approach anybody in the organization and have a pretty blunt conversation that they clicked a phishing test or their computers are not up to date and they're outside of compliance. Communication is just part of everything that we do all day.
That's fascinating. So I noticed from your LinkedIn profile that your original background anyway was more in liberal arts than computer science. How do you integrate all the technology stuff, or how did you or did you integrate the the technology background that you need to be part of a high-tech company? And was that a challenge? And what do you suggest for people in general trying to get into this field? I know that's a pretty broad question, but people that don't have, let's say, the classic hardcore computer science or programming background, what paths do you see for those people?
Sure. So, right, my degree is in psychology, which I find vastly useful on a day-to-day basis when it comes to getting people to engage in things that they are not natively incentivized to engage on. That degree comes very much in handy. In terms of technology, right, I've always been a tinkerer. I was able to program when I was in third grade, and so I had to step up where I had a lot of technical acumen coming into it, but not a degree that showed it. Um, and so my personal path was I went back to school to get an associate's in computer science just so I could show potential employers after I had burned out of the social work field that I did know what I was talking about. And here's a piece of paper to prove that. But I have many people on my team that have no formal education in information technology, computer science, or anything of that nature. They're either marketing or communications majors. Um, and so long as you have a general technical aptitude, I find you can enter this field through a few different paths. You can start the governance, risk, and compliance side and just deal with internal audit, and you're going to start working through controls with your HR departments, with your legal team, and there's a lot of security controls that you wouldn't necessarily think of as quote unquote security because they don't have technologies behind them, but there's a ton of security work to be done simply through interfacing with people, processes, making sure your policies are accurate and up to date, and enacting those and helping people understand why they need to conform to these policies and having those discussions with them. And so communications is just as much a part of this as the technology is. Technology is easy to learn. Communications is really difficult. And if you're not a good communicator, it's just this field will be extremely difficult to operate in.
I totally agree. It's much easier to learn technology than communications, right?
Yes.
But what if there are people that are very talented hardcore programmers and computer science geeks and down to bits and bytes. Do you have any thoughts? How can those people learn to be better communicators, or do you offer internal training for such people? Any thoughts on kind of the opposite? So you came from the direction of liberal arts, good communication, and you had the technical acumen. What about somebody who's more of a hardcore programmer? Any good paths for them to acquire some of these skills other than by sort of on-the-job training?
Yeah, so in terms of on-the-job training, right, we've had a lot of successful people come through that started in our security operations center, and they have developed some phenomenal communication skills just due to the interactions you have to have with internal stakeholders when you're doing some sort of security investigation. It becomes a forcing factor to become a good communicator in order to get accurate, timely responses from the people you need to help you with an investigation. Outside of that, I think there's a number of public speaking courses. I forget the name of it. There's a group. They have a bunch of different national national local organizations that spin up. I know there's one up around Rochester, New York. There might be one around here. I can look into it. But they offer sort of improv sessions in order to help people become more comfortable with communicating. And really, it's just a matter of doing it more. If you're uncomfortable with it, pick up some hobby or attach yourself to some project at work that's going to force you to do it. And it's really just trial and error, and you'll get through it.
I think that's good. So you very interestingly identified kind of two entry-level paths, right? So there's the real hardcore tech person, understands networking, could go into a SOC position, right? I heard you say that. And then someone who has a tech sort of acumen, as you described it, but is a good communicator, maybe in the governance, risk, and compliance area. Are there other sort of big areas of security that might take people in? One, I don't know, what about like software security and that kind of thing? Or are there other big areas that you can think of that people could sort of break into the field?
Yeah, so there's application security engineering, which would be working alongside of the engineers at the organization and being sort of what you would think of as a security champion. If you're currently an engineer trying to break into the cybersecurity field, if your organization is following BSIM, which is a framework for secure engineering, they have this concept of security champions. And so it would be worth reaching out to the InfoSec department there, asking for more details on that. There's also while it has a higher bar of entry, penetration testing and the red team group. There's right the technical acumen there that is generally expected is higher than that of the other groups. But there's also many more resources out there in order for you to learn at your own pace and learn outside of school or within school. Right, there's Hack the Box. There's a few different self-learning paths that you can do. And if you achieve the OSCP, you largely have put your foot in the door at almost any company. And so that's a good entry point as well.
Very good. Yeah, I agree. So there's many paths into the security field. There's no one size that fits all, which is the fun thing about this, because there's so many different kinds of people that get into the field and then continue to rise as you did to director level or CISO level or other levels. So do you have, how has the pandemic affected you guys? And also we had this big power failure, or a couple of power failures, and I know you're in the systems reliability business. So have you, how has the pandemic affected your company or your outlook? Or you're in the MSP business, which is, I think, an extremely good area since people are using more third parties to manage all of IT. So,
yeah, I mean, so the pandemic was interesting. Our organization largely was postured that because we're a global company, we don't have any sort of implicit trust of you have to be on our network and that governs you permission to access certain things. And so the transition to work from home was a challenge more of scale than it was of having the right technologies in place. And so it's been evaluating, are people opting to use their personal machines or their work machines? And then navigating, if people are choosing to use their personal machines, how do we secure those and still allow the employee that idea of privacy, right? This is your machine, not our machine. How do we enable you to use that, but still be secure while connecting to our systems? And so those have been really interesting challenges to try to navigate. The power loss event was definitely interesting. Typically, right, we'd all be at the office. Our offices have generators that look like those at the hospitals. And so, right, we can operate out of our Norwalk office for a week with no power. But with COVID, right, that disaster recovery plan goes out the window because we don't have generators at everybody's house. On the flip side, because everybody is working from home now, a lot of people opted to leave Connecticut and go either to family homes or somewhere where they are more comfortable. And so if they came to Connecticut to work at Datto, we saw a lot of people sort of go home. And that was a huge boon when you have a disaster event with the power outages that we saw. I think it was the third most damaging event in Connecticut's documented history. And so we actually were able to weather that because we had all this, diverse population of workforce across the United States and globally.
That's interesting. So that says for the future, the sort of global diversity or geographic diversity is going to improve disaster recovery, right? And so,
At least from a workforce availability standpoint, yeah.
yeah. Do you all, I don't know if you've announced plans to bring people back to central offices or enable people to work remotely for the rest of the year? Have you made any announcements? Or what's your personal feeling about what's going to happen there in the next 6 months?
Yeah, my personal feeling, I think the benefits of having a remote workforce um, outweigh the negatives of it. I think if you have an employee base that can be trusted to work from home and that employee base is being as productive, the best that you can measure it, then allowing people to work from home abates a lot of risks, namely around availabilities due to disaster. You save a lot of money on your office space, therefore um, you have more funds to redistribute to wherever else you want. I think hiring in this time is interesting because when you take a workforce that used to work together and now put them remote, there's a lot of connections that have pre-existed and continue through the remote force. And so um, I don't feel isolated from my team because I have a regular cadence of communication with them. But I could see there's some struggles that still need to be worked through for new hires that are fully remote on how do you onboard them in such a way that they feel inclusive of the team.
Yeah, that's hard. So speaking of new hires, what kind of final thoughts do you have for people that do want to get into this field? We did talk about different paths. What would be the top 3 things you would look for in somebody's resume if you were reviewing a new candidate?
Yeah, if they were net new and they did not work in the information security field currently, but they were looking to break into it, I would look to see um, are they able to relate their past experiences to the challenges that an information security field faces? And so while you don't necessarily need to put it down on your resume, you should be able to talk to, I did this, and have that mental map of how that maps to the same type of work in the information security field. I think uh, getting a certificate of some nature shows that you personally are invested in this, you're willing to put the time into it, and that'll get your foot into a lot of doors. And then I think the last is don't be afraid if you work in an organization that has an information security field or department, go start networking with them and asking, are there things that you can help out with? There are things that you as an employee know that the information security department doesn't just because you deal with it all day, every day. And so either establish yourself as the point of contact for your incident response team, set yourself up as a security champion, or really just advocate for security within your local department. And that is the best way that you can sort of start breaking into this field.
Yeah, that's great. So the first 2 apply to everybody. The third one is for somebody already working in another department in the company, right, that wanted to transfer into security. So I think I get that. So
Yeah, exactly.
very cool. Thank you so much, Chris. I appreciate your time and insight, and have a good afternoon. And thanks to all listeners for another session on cybersecurity career intelligence, and see you again next week.
Thank you.